Today I'm going to be testing the new MiniMax M3 model. This is a very capable model, especially relative to the price point. If you've not yet heard of it, definitely stick around because it is something worth checking out, and it is significantly cheaper than using something like Opus or GPT with very similar performance. I'm going to be running it through different coding tasks. I'm going to be comparing it to other models that I use, and I'm going to show you how you can set it up inside of Cursor so you can check it out and see if it's worth you using for various coding tasks. Anyways, let's get into it and let me explain what this model is before we get into all of the tests. Okay, so first of all, what is MiniMax? Well, this is a Chinese lab that's released a ton of models recently, and importantly, they've been putting all of the weights open. That means that you can actually download the weights, you can fine tune them, you can play with them, and that is in stark contrast to a lot of the other models out there, for example, ones from Anthropic or GPT, which are fully closed off. Now this has a 1 million context window maximum size, it is multimodal, meaning it can do image, video, text generation, etc., and can be free to run depending on how you run it. Of course, you can run it from the API, which is significantly easier. It was released June 1st, and if we quickly go in, you can see how it kind of compares in the benchmark to some of the other top models out there right now. And if we keep going, just to reiterate, very good coding performance, 1 million token context window. However, it's guaranteed to have at least 512,000. The way this works is depending on what you're using the model for, the token window can slightly shrink. So again, you have minimum 512, maximum 1 million, which is more than enough for most of the tasks that you do. And it has a native multimodal support, meaning it was actually trained from the beginning with image and video generation that was not tacked on afterwards, which is an important caveat. If we keep going here, just an example, this is something the MiniMax team did. They ran this for 12 hours fully autonomously. It was able to keep executing, keep looping without any human intervention, which just shows that the context window works and the model can do tons of tool calls before eventually giving up. And if we keep going, the most important thing about this model is the price. This is not the best model that currently exists. It is very good. It's also very good at tool calling. What is important though is how cheap this is relative to what it competes against. MiniMax has a few different token plans, which we're going to have a look at here in a second. But if you just spend $20 per month, you get approximately 1.7 billion tokens. Now, if we compare how many tokens you get if you're running with Anthropic, if you're using Claude Haiku here, you'll get about 11.1 million tokens for $20. If you're using Claude Sonnet 4.6, you'll get about 3.7 million. And if you're using Opus 4.8, you'll get about 2.2 million tokens. Now, if we put that as a multiple here, that means you get 765 times more tokens than you would with Opus for the same $20 that you are paying. Of course, if you're using the subscription with Claude, you're going to get a few more tokens, but just showing you how much more value you get with a model like this. It's kind of insane that it is this cheap. And while something like Opus 4.8 is still going to be outperforming this in a lot of coding tasks, because of how cheap this is, it makes a lot of sense to run it. And even inside of tools like OpenClaw or Hermes Agent, you get a lot of value from this rather than using these super expensive APIs from Anthropic. So what we're going to do in just one second is I'm going to run this through 3 different types of prompts, building something from scratch, doing some kind of system code, and then doing a big refactor. And I'm going to compare this to Composer 2.5, which is what I use as my daily coding model. So with that said, let's get into it. All right, so what we're going to do here is get this set up inside of Cursor. I'm going to show you the process in case you want to follow along. And that's because Cursor is the best place to run this for just raw coding tasks, because their coding harness is the best on the market, at least in my opinion, from what I have tested. If you do want to use this, you will need to have some kind of token plan or just do it based on API pricing. So you can see that they have a price per tokens, and then they have the token plans. The token plans are going to be the best value. And because I teamed up with MiniMax for this video and they kindly sponsored it, I'm able to give you guys 12% off any of the token plans here if you sign up using my link below with the discount code that is there. Now, I'm currently on the Ultra plan just because they gave it to me for free, but you can use anything that you want. And for most of you, $20 per month is going to be plenty. Of course, you can also just pay for the API pricing as you see right here. Okay, so what we're going to do is just pick one of these plans. I have subscribed to this one right here. From there, we can just go directly into our console. I'll leave this link in the description for the MiniMax landing page. We can go over to our subscription where we can see the plan details. And we're just going to look for our subscription key here. This is the key we need to use when we want to access our token plan from some third-party tools. So now that we have that key, I'm just going to quickly go to the documentation. You can see here, I'll leave this link in the description. This is right from MiniMax. Inside of Cursor, what we can do is we can go to our models, we can expand the API key tab, we can override the OpenAI base URL using the links right here, and then we can put our subscription key in the API field, enable the key, add the model that we need. All right, so I'm inside of Cursor here. What I need to do is go to my Cursor settings. I'm gonna go over here to where it says models, so let's find that. We're gonna go to the API key section here where it says OpenAI API key. We are going to override this. I'm gonna go enable OpenAI API key, and I'm gonna override this OpenAI base URL and just remove that from here. Now, if we go back to the website here, you can see that we need to enter the MiniMax base URL. So if we're international, which we are, we're gonna use this. If we're from China, we can use the other URL. So I'm gonna put that value inside of here and just change that to be MiniMax. And then I'm gonna go and grab my subscription key here. Let me copy this. Obviously, I don't wanna leak it, and paste it here for the OpenAI API key. Okay, so we've got both the values here. Now that we have that, what we need to do is just add a new model. So we're gonna go to View All Models. We're gonna scroll down and we're gonna add a custom model. And for the model name, let's go back here to the documentation, and we can see that it tells us to simply add the name MiniMax-M3. So let's go here and simply add that and press on add. Okay, and then it just takes a second. It should show up in the list and it should be enabled. If we want to test this now, we can reopen our agent window. We can scroll down and change it to MiniMax M3 and just say something like hello world and see if we get a response. Okay, so we've got a response here. It's working. It's now inside of Cursor, and we can start our test where we run it through a bunch of different coding exercises. All right, so I've got two windows open here, one for MiniMax and one for Composer 2.5. This is the model that I'm typically using inside of Cursor because it's very fast, has good performance, and it's not super expensive compared to something like Opus or 5.5 or the new Fable model that just came out. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna give the same prompt to both of them. I'm gonna read through it here in 1 second. Essentially what I wanna do is just see how this works when building something from scratch. So I'm gonna say build a URL shortener web app from scratch in a single project. The requirements, Node.js, make sure you have this API endpoint, some get endpoint, a dashboard page, and a clean modern styling. Okay, same exact thing here we're gonna give to Composer. So we're gonna run both of them at approximately the same time, and let's see the results that we get and also how long it takes to do this. Okay, so both of these have now finished running, and I wanna show you what they've built. Now let's start with MiniMax. So this is the MiniMax version. You can see kind of the UI, and effectively it's a URL shortener, so pretty straightforward. But if I go techwithtim.net/12345 or something, and then shorten it, you can see that it creates it. And then if I click the shortened URL, you can see that it brings me here. So it just does the redirect, and then if we refresh the clicks, you can see the number of clicks that we have. Again, if we go back to it and then refresh, you can see now we have 2 clicks. Straightforward, it works, does dark mode, light mode, it has path validation. So if I go like something random and there's no .com, it says, that you need to have it says, you need a valid URL, you get the idea. Okay, so that is what MiniMax created. And then this is what Cursor or Composer created. So let's refresh, let's click on this one, go back and refresh, and you can see we get 2 clicks. Light mode, dark mode. Yes, we need to fill this in. Okay, we need a valid URL, so let's go https techwithtim, if we spelled this correctly, .net/some value, and then shorten, and you can see it adds it to the list. So both of them achieved the task. It's not rocket science, obviously, to create this, but now let's have a look at what actually happened when it was running and the code that it produced. So if we start with MiniMax here, what you're gonna notice is that this actually wrote a significant amount of code. In fact, we have 21 files here. We can see that everything is pretty nicely separated out. None of the files are too large. And if we just click into a few of them here, let me move this down. You'll see we have like our configuration, our databases in one file. We have all of our error handling, our various routes. Let's move this over a little bit. We have our redirect, the link service, we have utilities, and it even wrote full tests. So you can see we have full test coverage here of the entire app. And yeah, everything is working and overall pretty good. Now I will say the MiniMax did take significantly longer to run than Composer. In fact, we're talking probably 5 or 6 times the amount of time because Composer ran in about 2 minutes and MiniMax took about 15 minutes to run. However, One of the reasons why this took so long to run is, first of all, it wrote more code, as you're going to see in a second, and second of all, it tested everything that it did. So it actually opened up the browser, executed a ton of tools, and was running for a long amount of time and using as much of that context as it could. And you can see here that we're only at about 106,000 of the total 1 million token context window. Overall, it was very self-critical. It actually changed a lot of things, fixed a lot of code, wrote something, changed it afterwards, and it started by drafting all of the code before it actually wrote any of the files, which did delay the tool calls a bit because it needed to then go again and generate all of the files after the code was written. So overall, pretty pleased with the performance of that. And again, we got just a better output, as you're going to see now when we compare to Composer. So with Composer, we got 7 files. It kind of just jammed everything into all these files. It didn't create a nice structure like MiniMax did there. And if we have a look here, the server is just, all of the code in one. We have our index, again, that's everything. We have our app.js. I know it's a little bit difficult to see. This is just all of the code together in one file. And then same thing for the styles, all 300 lines of code. Our database like this, okay? And it didn't use any other, like module. It just used this better SQLite 3 thing. So not horrible. I mean, it did what we asked it to do, and the code is much simpler, but there's just a lot less. There's no test. There was no validation. And while, again, this did run very quickly, it really just gave us the absolute bare minimum for the task that we asked for. It didn't go kind of above and beyond like MiniMax. So I don't have a problem with that, but again, it didn't validate anything, it didn't test anything, pretty much just went and spat out the code as fast as it possibly could. And while that's good in certain situations, of course, it's not really comparable to the output that we got here. Okay, so that is the first task. Now let's move to the next one. Okay, so for our next task, I want to do something that's a little bit more back-end heavy, that's not web-based, because a lot of times these models are really good at web tasks, but they suck at anything else. So in my case, I'm going to ask it to build some Rust code. I want it to write a ray tracer in Rust from scratch. I have no idea how complicated that is and if this is even possible whatsoever, but let's see if it can possibly do that. I want it to render a scene of 4 to 5 spheres on a checkered ground to a PNG, actually output PPM to keep it dependency free. And full disclosure, I used AI to generate this prompt, but I'm just trying to get a sense of what these models can do. So let's run this here in both of the windows. You can see I've cleared this now. We have new agents, new context windows. Let's go and let's see what we get. All right, so the task has finished. Similar results to before, where Composer ran significantly faster, but didn't give us as good of an output. And then MiniMax took a lot longer to run, but gave us something that was a lot more usable. So first of all, let's just look at the result. These are the 2 images that were generated. I've not changed them at all. On the right, actually, let me just adjust these so it's easier to understand. On the left, we have the Composer outputted image, and on the right, we have the MiniMax output version. Now, again, this is what was generated from the code once this was rendered with ray tracing. Now, if we look on the left, first of all, this image is upside down. If we actually flip it over to how it should be, you can see that now we get a better image. However, the ray tracing doesn't seem to be really working properly. It looks like it's for some reason flipped or mirrored the stuff. We don't see the reflection of the yellow ball. The checker is upside down. This one is correct, but it's done something weird or incorrect here, not exactly what I asked for, obviously. And then if we look at the right side, this one came from MiniMax. This is a much more accurate ray traced image, at least from what I can gather. We can see that at least it's in the correct orientation. The black ball's over here, the red ball's over here. It's not perfect, but it looks a lot more dimensional, I guess you could say. And then we have the other ball in this side here kind of being cut off, but with those dimensionality, and generally looks better and more accurate. Okay, so if we quickly have a look at the code, this is the MiniMax version. It didn't generate significantly more code. It was a similar amount, but it did take, again, maybe 3 or 4 times the amount of time to output here. If we look, we can see all the files are relatively clean, nicely commented, not too large. And then if we go check out the Composer version, we get a similar thing, not as many comments or kind of explanations. We can see it just generated the code without really any inline comments, which is okay. The files seem fine. I'm not a Rust expert, so it's hard for me to kind of analyze them. And we got a similar amount of output that we did with MiniMax, but again, the result is not as good. Now we can sure fine tune some of the parameters, but something it's doing here must just be incorrect to give us that kind of weird reflection that you're seeing there in that output. Regardless, both of these models are capable of something a little bit more complicated using Rust, which is a more challenging language. But with MiniMax, we're seeing that we are just getting overall a higher quality, better result. And what I can gather right now is it seems like how MiniMax has been architected, it really is designed for longer running tasks where, yeah, it's going to take a little bit longer, but it's fully utilizing that context window. It's really analyzing things a lot deeper. And if I look at the number of steps that this is going through, it's much more than we get with Composer because it's really doing a lot of analysis in order to give us that result. And you can kind of just quickly see as I'm scrolling through the conversation chain here. So now let's move to our last task, which is going to be a large refactor on an existing code base to see how it handles that. All right, so we're moving on to the next task, which is a large refactor. Now I have a large repository here. We can quickly just have a look at the structure. It is a full application that I used to use for my Dev Launch mentorship program. It has a full backend here with a lot of messy Python code, even though I know it's a little bit difficult to read here. We have probably tens of thousands of lines of code. We have a very large front end, which I will go into in a second. I'm just kind of clicking through so you can get a sense of the scale of this code base. Of course, it's not millions of lines of code, but yeah, it's complex stuff, and it's not the cleanest or best written code base in the world because a lot of it was vibe coded. If we look at our front end, you can see there's a lot of TypeScript code, a lot of components. So the point is that this is a pretty complex code base, and what I'm going to do now is generate a prompt to do either a refactor or some type of additional feature, something where it needs to first understand the existing context and then go and add additions, which is much harder to do than doing something from scratch. Okay, so the prompt I came up with here, again, I just used AI to kind of analyze the code base first and then come up with something that would make sense. What I'm going to do is ask this to add a daily streak feature to our student dashboard. This is going to track how many consecutive days each student has completed at least one DSA question. And what I want this to do is add the backend endpoints, add the UI, add the core services. So what this is going to need to do is analyze the code base, understand what's already there, make some additions to existing files, add new context, and then do it across all of the different components that we have. So while it's not really a refactor because that's going to take a long time, I think this will still serve the purpose of understanding an existing complex code base and seeing how well it can add the additions. Now, just to give you a sense of kind of what this looks like, this is what the student's dashboard is right now. This is just running in a dev environment. So you can see it shows kind of job applications, DSA prep questions. If these load, they take a second to spin up here. Okay, so you can see all the questions, right? Because there's like a DSA tracker, the interview bank with different questions students can add, the resume review queue, courses, applications, whatever. This is just like kind of a template, but you can see kind of this full roadmap. And as I click through different items, it shows these different tasks that the student would need to do. So anyways, the point is I want to be able to modify this. Let's see how it handles that. Let's run it on MiniMax and let's run it in Composer. All right, so the task is now complete, and let's do a quick analysis on what was done here. Now again, Composer ran significantly faster. That's just a trend that we're seeing. The MiniMax does a lot more tool calls, takes a lot longer, and in fact, MiniMax was still analyzing the code base when Composer had actually finished the task, so keep that in mind. Now, for this particular task, there wasn't a massive difference in the code quality. Again, it does look like MiniMax wrote more code, detailed code, added more comments, wrote stuff that overall is probably going to be a little bit more maintainable. If I take a look here at Composer, so it's just in MiniMax, you can see like it only wrote one test, which is a lot smaller than the test that MiniMax wrote. A lot of the additions here are like really small UI additions, where when I look here, there's some larger changes that are being made by MiniMax. Now, in terms of actually getting the code to compile and execute, if we go here, this is Composer's version. Really, the only change on the UI is just this daily streak component that was added. I didn't see anything else. And then I did test it. It was updating, but I can't really reproduce it easily right now. Now, if we close that off, I'll just rerun this now from the MiniMax version, and let's see what its UI looks like. Okay, and we can see here that it's loaded the streak. It has our best of 17 days, which I think is a feature we didn't have on the other one maybe. And anyways, it's working and we are good to go. Okay guys, so with that said, that's gonna wrap up this video. This is my analysis of MiniMax versus Composer. Of course, there's a lot of other models that we can compare this to. Generally speaking, it's very performant. It's not the fastest model in the world, but if we go to the usage here, we'll see that I don't think I've even used 2% of my 5-hour limit, which is just insane. And it means that I can really run this and just utilize it to the max without worrying about any kind of constraints, price, etc. That's really the main takeaway from me. This is a very capable model. No, it's not the current best model that exists, but for what it gives you, the price and value is just so good that for 90+% of tasks, you're gonna be better off using something like this because it's just so much cheaper and it still gets the job done. So anyways, guys, that's gonna wrap up this video. Again, if you wanna purchase a subscription, use that discount code down below, and I will see you guys in the next one.